down. Your legend grows. Double down. Your advantage grows. Stay strong. Now you're fighting with heart, Guardian.
Ladies and gents, my name is Xander, aka Diaslayers, and in this video, we're going to discuss and review the difference between God roles, unique roles, and curated roles, and find out which one of these three is actually the best, or rather, perhaps a better question would be to ask, which one of them is equivalent to the other? Is one really better than the other? Are all of them spectacular? Or are all of them complete muff cabbage trash shenanigans? That, Diaslayers, is the million-dollar question. And to really kind of get a sense as to where you guys stood on this, I did a poll, as you guys can see from right here on YouTube, but I also did it on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and across the board, all of you thought that D, the fourth option, was the best, and saying that God roles were actually better than unique roles, which were equivalent to curated roles. To be 110% honest, this was a trick question, because none of those four answers was right, and rather it should have been a fifth answer, which was E, none of the above. The best way to describe that is by clearly defining what a God role, a unique role, and a curated role actually is, and then ensuing this, I wanted to go over some specific examples as to which one of these weapons was actually what and classified amongst these. To be more precise, we're going to be looking specifically at the Trust, the Bygones, the Epicurean, and the Kindled orchid, just to name a few, but we're also going to toss in a couple other oddballs in there so that you guys really comprehend as to exactly what's going on. And so the only thing left to do, my friends, is to simply sit back, relax, eviscerate that notification button, and let's jump right into the video. First of all, let me just say that the inspiration for this video is coming from all of us, myself included as well as you, because I can't tell you as to how many times that people have asked me, or other Guardians have asked other Guardians about this role and that role, it being a curated role, a God role, a unique role, and all that kind of jazz. So I thought, what a better way than to just really define as to exactly what all these things are and classify it for everybody so that we're no longer guessing as to what really makes these things each one of these categories. To start off the discussion, we had to define exactly what a God role is. And so what a God role is a weapon role that has complementary perk synergy or a compensation perk synergy, but preferably both of these together, designed specifically for either PvP or PvE, and in some cases, both PvP and PvE together. Now, a lot of you know me as a PvP kind of guy, so I'm always looking for God roles that correlate to PvP, but sometimes those roles also associate with PvE. In addition to this, I'm constantly trying to get perks that will proc the other, aka complementary perk synergy, but simultaneously looking for perks that will help with the weapon's weaknesses like range or stability, aka compensation perk synergy. If you can get a role that's going to have this marvelous symbiotic relationship with both of these two synergies, and is also going to be excellent for say PvP and PvE, then that right there is the ultimate God role and is going to eradicate, decimate, and obliterate every single Guardian in your path. However, I realize that RNG may not be on your side, and that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. But nonetheless, if you can find many of these categories in one weapon, then that's definitely going to be classified as a God role. Now the next question that we have to ask ourselves is, okay, well, what exactly is a curated role? A curated role is a weapon role that drops completely masterworked, 10 out of 10 for range, stability, or whatever it might be, and doesn't allow for any perk changes. What you see is what you get, courtesy of Bungie. Back when Forsaken dropped, almost a whole year ago now, I know the time flies, I can't believe it myself, Bungie introduced this concept of curated roles. And pretty much what they are is standardized roles that cannot be changed whatsoever in the slightest and are always going to have that masterwork according to what Bungie sees fit. Is this a God role? Maybe, maybe not. Is it a unique role? Maybe, maybe not. And to really comprehend as to how all these things are really differentiating is by understanding a unique role. A unique role is a weapon role that has a dual perk combination or potentially a single perk, which can't be found on any other weapon in general, which can't be found on any other weapon class, meaning hand cannons, pulse rifles, fusion rifles, etc., or which can't be found on any other weapon art type, meaning rate of fire among hand cannons or rate of fire among pulse rifles, etc., etc. In other words, you might happen to have Feeding Frenzy, which is one particular perk that can't be found on any other class of fusion rifle in the entire game, And if there is a fusion rifle out there, which I know there is, and I'll explain that in a little bit, then that will be classified as a unique role. In correlation with this, you also might have an example of a particular perk combination, something like say Rampage and Firefly, that can't be found on any other hand cannon or it might be found on some other auto rifle, and if that's the case, then those weapons right there are still going to be classified as unique weapons. And hearing all these definitions, I think that you guys now have a very thorough and clear-cut understanding as to what exactly a god role versus a curator role versus a unique role really is. And so to really get some better examples of all this stuff, I want to look at several weapons, but the first one that I want to do so with is the Trust hand cannon. Throughout this video so far, you guys have been seeing one particular trust, and that trust is what I would define as a god role, or at least a variation of any god role that might fit you and your playstyle the best. And for me, that god role is the one that you guys see right there on screen. It's got Rampage, Outlaw, Extended Magazine, Small Bore, a backup mag, and a reload masterwork. The reason as to why I classify this as a god role is because this thing not only has good overall lethality aspects with Rampage, but it's also got some really good synergy to keep the magazine going, or at least have a longer duration for that magazine as long as possible. With Extended Magazine, I'm going to have at least 12 bullets now, up from 9 in the magazine. And then when I couple this with say a backup mag mod, now I'm going to have 14 bullets in the magazine. And as soon as I happen to get a kill, and that just so happens to be a critical headshot, I'm going to proc Outlaw and thus get all 14 of those bullets back into my magazine that much faster. When you combine this with Rampage, this is then going to give Rampage the most optimal chance to continuously proc it from one guardian into the next. And if you happen to have something like say a Rampage spec mod instead of the backup mag mod, then that's going to work just as well. Because again, the premise here is to have all that synergy from all these things together to make a god roll. Remember, what you're always looking for is complementary perk synergy in correlation with compensation perk synergy. And so as long as you guys keep that stuff in mind for a PvP or a PvE or both types of environments together, then that's going to be fantastic. But what this thing also happens to have is a specific curator role, and that one you can also see right there on screen. It's got explosive payload, Genesis, light mag, small bore, and a range masterwork. This one meets the conditions of a curator role because as soon as it happened to drop, it dropped with a 10 masterwork range. But not just this, I can't change a single perk here, and thus by definition, it's clarified as a curator role. Do I think that this role is the best for PvP? Heck no. Do I think that this thing is the best for PvE? Certainly not. And so if you were to ask me, I wouldn't actually use this in either environment, nor would I classify it as a god role because there's no perk synergy between the three, and the only way in which I can classify it as is a curator role because it meets the two conditions that I mentioned from earlier. However, this trust also happens to have a unique role, and that unique role has to include two perks. Number 1, Rampage, and number 2, Firefly. What you guys see right there is the combination that I just mentioned, and the reason why I don't have any other perks highlighted in the first and second column is because it doesn't matter for a unique role. And the reason why this is important to mention is because no other hand cannon in the entire game can roll with Rampage and Firefly. And so for PvE, this is going to be awesome and spectacular and marvelous in so many ways, especially when you happen to think about a ton of thrall just coming right at your face, and then boom, one shot, you're going to proc Rampage times 3, and then boom, they're all going to explode because they happen to have Firefly. Do I think that this role is good for PvP? Maybe, maybe not. I really wouldn't know because I haven't tested it out myself yet, but in order for you to really know that, you're going to have to test it out for yourself. And now that you kind of get all these three things combined as to why this trust is a god role, a curator role, or a unique role, the very next thing that we can analyze is the Bygones. And this one's a little bit different with a few more examples, so let me explain. The role that you guys have been seeing throughout all this game footage so far is my god role, and the one that is right there on screen, with Head Seeker, Kill Clip, Flared Magwell, Full Bore, a Counterbalance mod, and a Stability Masterwork. The reason why I clarify this as a god role is because when you happen to have Kill Clip and Flared Magwell together, that's a very, very good combination because number 1, Flared Magwell is going to give you an increase in weapon's reload speed, and that's going to allow you to proc Kill Clip that much more quickly. You're also going to have an increase in the weapon stability, and that's very, very important to have because with pulse rifles, they have a tendency to miss a couple of their shots within that burst, and so a higher stability is certainly going to compensate for that. Obviously, these two perks have some great and awesome complementary perk synergy, but when you add on Head Seeker on top of that, That's then going to increase the weapon's damage output to 44 points of damage per crit instead of 41 when kill clip is procced, and that right there is fantastic because once again, it allows for more damage at longer distances, less damage fall off. You can really see as to why this particular Bygones is the definition of a god roll. However, what you have to understand is that this roll right here is not a unique roll, because not only can the Bygones, but the Horror's Least and the Claws the Wolf can have this exact same roll with Headseeker and Kill Clip, thus making it null and void for a unique roll. Now I'll come back to the unique roll in a second, but what I want to mention here first is that this weapon actually has no Curator roll. That's because the weapon never drops completely masterworked, and this weapon always drops with multiple selection perks. Remember, both of those two conditions have got to be met in order for the weapon to have a Curator roll. And so now that we have this clearly understood, the very next thing that we can come back to is that unique roll. And for the Bygones, this one has to include opening shot and full auto, or it might include something like, say, opening shot and slide shot, making this thing a very, very unique roll. There is only 2 pulse rifles in this entire game as of the making of this video that can actually roll with opening shot, and Bygones, along with the Chattering Bone, is those 2 pulse rifles. But what makes this thing so unique is the fact that this one can roll with both opening shot and full auto, or opening shot and slide shot. Think about it this way. With full auto, all you guys simply do is hold on the trigger, and that's going to make it so that easy mode is engaged. But every single time that the weapon bursts, you're going to have opening shot proc for that initial bullet within that burst, and that's why it's going to have some great synergy. If that's not your cup of tea, then don't worry, because with opening shot and slide shot, every single time that you happen to slide, and also every single time that you fire the weapon, you're going to get that increase in range from both of these two things combined, at least for the first bullets via opening shot and the consecutive bullets via slide shot. Could each one of these 2 unique rolls become a god roll? Yes, they certainly could, because maybe you're looking for something that's going to have consistency, or maybe you're looking for something that's going to have the overall greatest range for a particular pulse rifle. With that, I think that you guys now kind of get a very good understanding of how primary weapons can be considered either god rolls, unique rolls, or curator rolls. But the next thing that we haven't covered yet is some special weapons, and the one that I want to focus on here is the Epicurean. And the roll that I classify as a quote-unquote god roll is this one right there on screen. It's got a rangefinder, under pressure, enhanced battery, small bore, and a range masterwork. I really think that this would be the definition of a god roll if it happened to have something like, say, projection fuse instead of an enhanced battery, as that would then give the weapon more overall effective range, and when you couple that perk with, say, rangefinder and range masterwork and small bore, it's going to have an astronomical amount of range, so much to the point that it's going to be able to easily cross-map. Remember, this Epicurean really doesn't have that great of an overall base range stat, and so together, these things are then going to have a compensation perk synergy. But not just this, when you incorporate something like, say, under pressure, you're then going to have increased stability and accuracy on the bottom half of the magazine, which might I add is every single time that you happen to spawn, because we always spawn with 2 bullets in our fusion rifles. Now that you kind of grasp as to why this particular roll is a god roll, I want to really hone in on this weapon's curator roll. And although I don't have it, I can show it to you right there, because that's going to be defined as backup plan, tap the trigger, accelerated coils, hammer force rifling, and a handling masterwork. Once again, the way in which this curator roll would then drop for you is by automatically coming with a plus 10 handling masterwork, and then when you inspect it, you obviously won't be able to change any of those perks that I just described, and thus it's classified as a curator roll. What I also will say is that this curator roll is technically classified as a unique roll, because even though I don't happen to have the curator roll of this thing, I do happen to have a unique roll because this is the only fusion rifle that has backup plan and tap the trigger. As you guys can tell from right there, this is the roll that I happen to have with exactly those 2 perks. Let me be very, very clear. There is not a single other fusion rifle in this entire game that can roll with this kind of perk combination, and thus this particular roll is classified as a unique roll. If you were to ask me, I might even classify this one as a god roll depending on the other perks that this thing happens to have, because this thing would do beautifully in PvP. And the reason why this is so is because backup plan is going to give you that fast charge rate as soon as you happen to swap to the weapon, and then tap the trigger is also going to give you the initial trigger pull to be more accurate and more consistent, and that's exactly what you're going to need for a PvP environment. So the main thing that I want you guys to take away from this Epicurean is that yes, this thing might have a god role that could be entirely different from its curator role, but its curator role is also a unique role, and that unique role might be good for your particular playstyle and defined as a god role. With the explanation of the Epicurean, I think that you guys now fully grasp all the concepts that we've been discussing so far. But just to reinforce this one more time, I want to look at the very last weapon, and that is the Kindled Orchid. The Kindled Orchid is probably one of the only weapons that can be classified as a god role, a unique role, and a curator role all in one. And the clear-cut way in which we can really see this is by inspecting the weapon to see its exact perks. And you guys can tell from right there that this thing happens to have Rampage, Kill Clip, Drop Mag, Corkscrew Rifling, a Rampage spec mod, and a Range Masterwork. If it wasn't already obvious enough, this one right here is the definition of a curator role, because I can't change any other perk combinations on this weapon since those perks are the only ones here, and not just that, it already dropped with a Range Masterwork, making it once again defined as a curator role. It's also a unique role because this is the only hand cannon in the entire game that can roll with both Kill Clip and Rampage. For that one dual perk combination alone, it's obviously defined as a unique role. Lastly, it's also defined as a god role because this thing once again has Rampage and Kill Clip, and together, all you simply gotta do is reload as fast as you can via Drop Mag, which is then gonna proc Kill Clip that much faster, while simultaneously still proccing Rampage, and thus you can 2-tap Guardians very effectively. With a cherry on top and a few extra sprinkles, this thing becomes a delicious cone of ice cream because it's got Corkscrew Rifling and a Range Masterwork, which is exactly what the weapon needs to cover for the weapon's lack in range, making it a compensation perk synergy, and when you complement that with the weapon's complementary perk synergy, this thing is yet again defined as a god role. In assessing the Kindled Orchid, the Epicurean, the Bygones, and the Trust, you guys now have a fully comprehensive understanding as to why each one of these weapons does or doesn't classify as a god role, a unique role, or a curator role. Not just that, you also have some clear-cut definitions as to what, once again, a god role, a unique role, and a curator role actually are. Sometimes these roles are going to make enemy guardians a little bit salty, and other times they're not going to at all. But nonetheless, it really just comes down to you and your personal preference as to which one of these actually is going to fit you and your personal playstyle the best. And having said all this information, the only thing that I ask from you, my friends, is to share this information with your friends. I don't care if it's verbally or whatever you do, just make sure that we're all on the same page, because this type of information has got to be clear across the board for all Guardians. I don't care what type of things that you do, PvE, PvP, both, raids, no raids, trials come back please, or you simply just do a PvP 24/7, share it as this is going to help all of us Guardians in the big picture. Lastly, be sure to watch the newest, check the latest, and share a comment like on social media because you are the greatest. That's pretty much all I've got for you as of right now, Diaslayers. As always, GG, TNT.